And as a result, it was positively received because they could fully understand or sympathize because she had, you know, gone that extra step that we as Black women have to do in this world to be able to, you know, get our feet anywhere in any doors. Links to Nigeria. So Omba Aina is her name, but when you research her, her name is Sarah Forbes Benetta. Queen Victoria, who I showed you before, is goddaughter. So, you know, she collected godchildren from around the world to be able to create those relationships. And again, godmother, again, another warfare, and taking the people to them picnic and having them here. We have Funmilayo Ransom Kuti. Do you know another name called Kuti? This is his mother.
Yeah.
And again, his mother was the first woman to be educated in Abeokuta, thank you, a grammar school, which was founded in 1908. And as a result of her having access to education, made it her life's work to be able to push women in the Nigeria region to be able to be educated. She was a very strong woman activist. She led over 10,000 women to fight for liberation. And again, inspired as a woman of inspiration, we now know her son's name more than we know her name. And again, we're looking at mothers who are doing the work, inspiring the next generation to then create work that creates a universal conversation, because his music isn't just about the continent, it is about the world and where we are found and how we resonate with that. And Buchi, thank you. Do we know her name? She's a prevalent British African novelist in this country. They say she is the most successful of that time after the Second World War. Buchi Emejita? Because my English is ramping with me at the moment, so I'm not getting the words out. And then this is the area that I really push during September to November. So I talk about the women's impacts in world wars globally. So we have the Women's Auxiliary for the North America, the Women's Army Auxiliary Corps. Do you know that Tyler Perry was here last year filming for the 6 888s? Yeah. So the 6 888s were part of the Women's Army Corps from America. They came over and they traveled around Europe. And the one thing that I will share with you, that when they got to France, they didn't think they could get their hairs done. And they were astounded to know that the iron, the hot comb is made in France. So their hot comb that is in America, that's the home of their hot comb. So there was more understanding of, you know, the global reach of, you know, science and things like that for these women. They also were inducted into tournaments to play sports throughout Europe. And again, when we're in anything, we change everything. And then we look at the evolution of their presence and the changes that it's made. And then on the end, I've added the US Marine Corps of the American Indians. And I'm not sure if you can read it, but I will for you. So on the left, we have Minnie Spotted Wolf. That's how her name was registered. She's from the Blackfoot Nations. Then in the middle, we have Celia Mix from the Potawatomi Nation. And then in the end, we have Viola Eastman. If you heard Viola Eastman, would you believe that she was from the Ojibwa tribe? So again, when we're doing the work and when we're looking, this is with what I do with history behind the history. This is history, but what is behind the history? Where their children put in concentration camps? You know, what are we looking at? And then when we look at why we're serving, most of the time when women are serving is to protect ourselves, our children, and our nations. So we have a lot of conversation about, you know, we shouldn't be no white man's war. What does that mean? And when you say that, what do you mean? Because how does that respect the steps that have been made for us to be able to come and sit here and do the things that we're doing and still be spearheaded and lobbying a lot of the things that we are based on us having the room to be able to talk about these things? We have, so I'm not gonna butcher her name, but Kathleen Walker, she changed her name back to her Indigenous name. She served for the Australian Women's Army Service. And her biggest understanding was she felt, why should my brothers be going out to war and I'm not also fighting? But through her going to fight, she then came across African Americans and then started to learn their struggle, took that information back to Australia and started lobbying for Australians in Australia and their Aboriginal rights. We have Maggie Gee of Chinese ancestry, but she very much identifies as American, but still holds on to her heritage. So we're looking at the cosmopolitan environment of the world and how we play a role. And then we have Kalyani Sen, and Chief Officer Margaret L. Cooper for the Women's Royal Indian Naval Services. And Kalyani Sen is very much like Kathleen Walker, because when she came to this country, because again, we have the tokens that are sent to be able to show this global unity. She said it's her responsibility to come and show what's actually happening in India. And she hopes that her presence will allow for Indian women to also be able to gain liberty as the world is supposed to during this war. Maori women from New Zealand, with the Women's Auxiliary Air Corps, Filipino women in the Women's Auxiliary Service, and the West Indian women in the Auxiliary Territory Services. So again, we're looking at women from the islands. UK, USA, and France, we have Norma Best. She was coming from South America, Belize, serving in the Auxiliary Territory Service. We have Lillian Bader, born here. Her father is of Bayesian ancestry. He served in the First World War. She signed up for the Royal Air Force, but when they found out she had a Black father, she was disbanded. And then when they decided that they would accept us again, she then signed up for the Women's Air Force, and that's where she served until the end of the war. And then we have Josephine Baker, who, when I talk about history, for my generation, she's known as the woman with the bananas, but the generations after, they do not even know who she is. But she served for the French intelligence. She was a spy. Yeah. And they said she was sewing intel into her costumes and putting it in with the sheet music. But she was imperative. The work that she was doing and her team was imperative in exchanging information backwards and forwards over enemy lines, but also providing entertainment as a woman to be able to build men's morale during the warfare. Do we know these women? Una Marston, first Black woman to be employed by the BBC. Barbara Blake Hannah, she was the first Black journalist. Yep, journalist, and Moira Stewart. So I grew up with Moira. I didn't grow up with Barbara Blake Hannah, and I only know about Una Marston because my ancestry is Jamaican. I'm not sure. Hannah, yeah, it was her. Yeah. And that Una Marston was pivotal during the Second World War about bringing the narratives back home of the West Indian servicemen who were in this country. She also, and can you see the West Indian radio newspaper? Again, literature that we have been creating in this country for a long time. And I think, this is my final picture slide. Do we know these faces? So when we talk about UK politics, what do our women have to be fighting through to be able to get to these positions? And how are we inspiring our children to be able to follow the models? And what does that mean? Yeah. Dear, you saw it was 3 women per slide. And when you look at the date, so Dawn is 1987, 10 years later, Valerie Amos is the first Black woman baroness. And then 13 years later, we have Floella Benjamin being elected by the Liberal Democrats. So literally these were later. Timeline. And I grew up watching Floella Benjamin on television. Her hair was exactly the same. And then we also know about her story because she wrote the book about the Windrush coming from Trinidad. And we're looking at the storytelling, Valerie Amos, I think she's from Guyana. And Diane Abbott is of Jamaican ancestry, born here. So we're looking at, different cultural upbringings, but yet coming to be face forward to be able to fight for a community that is, again, cosmopolitan. So when we talk about women and we talk about warfare, it's also important in this country that we live in to know the laws that we are bound by and that have changed in this country by the people who are doing the work. I talk about them after the Second World War as to not inundate you, but these are the things that I thought were very important for you to hear and to know. In 1956, women and teachers and civil servants were legally given equal pay. Are we still not talking about that now? 1958, Life Peerage Acts entitled women to sit in the House of Lords for the first time. Did you see 1997? Our first Black woman lord? 1958. 1961, the contraceptive pill becomes available through the NHS to married women. 1964 Married Women's Property Act entitles women to keep half of any savings. 1967, the contraceptive pill becomes available to single women through the NHS. 1967, abortion is legalized. 1968, equal pay initiated by women at the Ford factory in Dagenham, striking over equal pay. Yeah. 1973, the London Stock Exchange includes female members for the first time. 1975, Sex Discrimination Act makes it illegal to discriminate against women in work, education, and training. 1975. And you know in 1965, we have the Race Relations Act. 1975, the Employment Protection Act introduces maternity provisions for mothers. 1976, Domestic Violence and Matrimonial Proceedings Act introduced to protect women and children from domestic violence. 1979, Britain elects first female Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher, held the post for 11 years. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. Because you can't stop it. You can't do nothing about it. It happened. Okay? 1980, women can apply for a loan or credit in their own names. These are things you wouldn't even think about, right? Because we're in 2026. So we're looking at generations of women who have different rights. And again, when you're looking at liberation, you start to see the changes in society. So we're like, why don't you do this way? Because the world isn't the same way. We don't have the same rights. We're not the same people. 82, I was born then. Court of Appeal decided that bars and pubs are no longer able to refuse service to women because they wanted them in the house. So when they talk about, women should be in the kitchen, do we understand the nature of the world that we lived in this country? 1985, Equal Pay Act allows women to be paid the same as men for work of equal value. We're still having this conversation now. 1990, independent taxation for women is introduced, so they are taxed separately from their husbands. 1991, the composite tax system changes law, so women are allowed more independence and freedom from their husbands or partners. And in 1994, rape in marriage is made a crime. So when we're looking at history, it's also important not only to look at the faces and places and dates, also look at what was changing in the times and the warfare that women, everybody's going through warfare, but when we're looking at change and we're looking at womanhood, motherhood, and we're looking at our communities and our children, everything is changing every step of the way, and we are just unaware of that. So when we're looking at, why aren't we doing things this way? Because there is certain freedom that we have now that they did not have. When I do research in Ghana, I was dumbfounded to learn that women couldn't get passports unless their fathers or their husbands signed their papers. And bank accounts. And these are European models. And there are many European models that we are still subjected under worldwide that we are unaware of. So, in our freedom, in our liberalism, in our thinkings, it's important to go back to the documents that have permitted this freedom. Any independence of any country, there is paperwork that you should read through to understand the terms and conditions that were signed at the time for people to get their freedoms. And women have been there every step of the way, and the changes of our roles and our positions have always changed, but we are always ever present and we are always ever fighting. And I'd like to thank you for listening. Yeah, who's gonna go after?
Once again, I ask everyone to give Selena a big round of applause.
Just so you know, did you not see the King of England, Scotland, Northern Ireland, and Wales wearing black coveralls last year?
Yes.
2023. Did you see? The beautiful. Right. The reason why I bring it up is talking about legacy. If we aren't there, if we're not doing something, if we are not going to be seen in the way that we're saying we want to be seen, whether he wears it or not, are you wearing it? And what conversations are you having when you're wearing it? And why aren't you talking about him wearing it? So when he's saying, let me look into my past, why is he wearing it? Yeah? So start looking at what people are saying and what they are doing.
Amazing. Thank you, Selena. Thank you. Yes, that's what I'm going to do now. Sorry. Just going to say to, if you can just bear with me for a second to screen out. All right, so we stopped sharing. Can the people on Zoom hear?
Yeah, we hear
Can you
you.
hear?
Yes, can you hear us?
Glenroy, can you hear? Glenroy.
Yeah, I can hear.
Yes, we can
Right, I
hear.
just need you to yeah, thank you. Right. So we're doing questions now, questions and answers. And can you please, I don't know who's gonna, Sister Judy, you're gonna monitor the Zoom for questions? Yes, please. All right, so I'm gonna start with the room and then refer back to Zoom. So if you have a question, put your hands up.
No hands are up at the moment, Chair.
Okay, there is a question. Oh, no, it's not a question, it's a comment. Let's start with a question. Sorry. We've only got one mic, so you're gonna have to come up to the top table, please. Please, just orderly, so because we still got one more speaker before we go. So if you can just come up to the top table and ask your question. Who's first? You want to ask? Do you want to? You're not asking a question. Okay. Who wants to ask a question? Charmaine, you want to ask a question? Okay, cool. Think about that. No, turn the screen properly. Yeah, that's it.
I just like to big up Selena. She's been doing some amazing work for years, so I just like to big her up. But how can we in this room support you in the work that you're doing? Because as she's sitting here, she's a mother, she's doing all this work as well. How can we support you doing this work as well? Because we sometimes take you for granted, so you know, and give you the flowers while you're here. So how can we support you in the work that we do?
Buy pins. Buy and wear your pins. Don't worry about me not wearing it right now. But buy and wear your pins, because the reason why they exist is because if you don't see something, we're not triggered to start conversation. And I know that I've heard, you know, when I see it, I stop people in the streets and it starts a conversation. I don't think we're talking to each other. Yeah, I don't think we're talking to each other. My job is not to tell you about X, Y, and Z and all kinds of facts. My job is to tell you the interpretation that I've seen, and let's have a conversation, because then you will share with me your knowledge and I want to share with you my knowledge, and it's not going to be the same. So buy your pins. I do this work all year round. So book me to do your family trees, and I do, you know, Marcus Garvey's family tree. There's never been a Marcus Garvey family genealogist. There's never been a Marcus Garvey family genealogist. And I could never have known that it would be me 42 years later. So again, it's encouraging us to be able to learn from each other and share the work that's being done. You know, it's all about share. Share, and buy your pins. I know I have my flyers and they're on the website.
Thank you so very much. You've been amazing. I just want to ask a quick question. So, what's her name? Empress Many. Empress Many.
We have one question on Zoom, Chair.
Obviously, when I was doing this, I wanted to be able to correlate each woman to a war that made sense. Which war? Come on, thank you. Yes. Yeah, thank you. Yes. Very important. Thank you. I will add her to the next slide. Thank you. Four, now I'm going to add 4 circles. I'm going to add. Thank you. Thank you. Absolutely. Thank you.
We have one question on Zoom, Chair.
Not working anymore. They're not working.
We have one question on Zoom, Chair.
I don't think they can hear us.
I certainly haven't seen those documents. Are you going to publish so that we could find them? Can you tell us where we can find more information about it?
So yes, we will be publishing. Thank you. We will be publishing, and we're also working.
We have one
for a
question
documentary.
on Zoom,
Because
Chair.
when we look at the work that's being done, there's a lot of information that people didn't understand to start looking for. And the idea is to be able to encourage us to, we like to watch these documentaries and journeys. And I haven't been good at documenting my journey, doing this for 15 years. But the idea is how to document the journey of a man that means so much to all of us,
Which comment,
to be able to
Chairman?
understand how we
Thank Black
to be
Poppy Rose.
community leaders or community people who also mean as much to us, so we follow on with that pattern. So I will be publishing with we're still working on who to publish with, but the information will be published because it's not out there and it needs to be out there, so that is definitely important. So the implications of the death certificate, with everything, is very political. Marcus Garvey is not for everybody, okay? Marcus Garvey is not for everybody. And the reason why is because what he stands for and what we keep alive, and what we keep alive is the idea and the spirit of unity. It's the idea and the spirit of collective understandings and understanding that we are responsible for a continent inside and outside. And when we come together and we have ideas about how we want to come together, this is what shapes up the places that we call home. So when we talk about our connections to the history of this country, many of us don't have ancestors to go back to the 1500s in this country. Yeah, but what Marcus Garvey's message does, it allows us to connect with the Septimus Severuses, yeah, with the Stonehenges, with all the history that comes with this country and with the Black history that comes connected to it. We also have that connection, irrespective if it's not through our family bloodline.
We have
Thank you
we
very
have
much,
a
Steve. I really enjoyed your
question on
presentation.
the Zoom, Chair.
Just two things. One, Mary Seacole, extremely important
Will you
figure
be
in
speaking?
terms, because you're talking about women in war. She's
I
a
can hear
military
you. They
nurse.
can't hear you
Did you
locally.
present her tonight? I don't think
Yes,
right.
but will you
So-
be speaking? Because the
Oh,
time's
I'm
running,
supposed to be.
isn't it?
I just called Everton to talk to make sure they fix
Yeah.
that. So they're working on
No,
it.
no, not her grave. The statue outside St. Thomas Hospital. But, so anyway, she's part of it, but you didn't present tonight. Great.
Herman, I
and
don't
then the
think I'll
other
be ready
figure-
reading out your statement. Looks like we're not going to be heard.
Yeah, the other, because I don't know if they're going to hear. And then the other important figure is Phyllis Wheatley. Extremely important if we know the history of Marcus Garvey. I could say a third, but we'll talk afterwards in private. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair, we have this question.
I just
Oh,
wanted
dear.
to say thank you. I really appreciate that you went back to Hatshepsut. You're very much a hero of mine. And I feel like very often we don't go back that far. So we kind of went right back and then coming. I just basically wanted to say thank you for the work that you're doing, but also as well, just to honor Black women fighting the fight, because it was just the other day that they were actually trying to exclude Diane from Parliament. And if it wasn't for women folk particularly unifying, mobilizing, organizing, she would be the mother of the house, 10th election. So it's very much still ongoing. And it is about, if you don't ask, you don't get. It is about taking action. And I'm just proud to be in a room with other women that are very much part of that tradition, and that we're doing that and carry on doing that, because we've always been doing that. But thank you.
Right, so there's a question.
For me, it was kind of, I like the gist of the fire show.
I thought they were going to be questions sent. through the
Yes,
chat.
Chair. Marie X
Marie?
wanted to ask a question.
To be able to
Can I read my
unmute and
comment?
ask your
Monitor,
question,
please.
please, on Zoom. What are we doing?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so maybe that means no question. So my
Yes,
question.
there is a question, Chair.
I've
Can
got
I
a
read
question.
my comment out?
So my question is in regards to that
How
time
is
when I
it that
called
you
you,
can't hear Judy and
saying
she's
that
in the
David
room?
Lammy did that little mini documentary something.
Can I
Judy,
read my
you're in the
comment out,
room.
please?
Could you say that Marie X wanted
Doesn't
to
even know
ask
how
a
to
question?
contact you. So I want to hear. I want her to repeat part of what she said to me,
It's a
but part of
question.
also why
Can you hear
it's
us,
important
Sister
that
Judy?
our voices, Black women voices, are also heard, because this is the point. She's doing all this work.
Sorry, I yield,
She's
Chair.
the prominent person doing this work.
I'll speak
And then
another
here
time.
comes David Lammy for his 15 minutes of fame.
Yeah, thank you, Maria, but that's not the issue. The
Mary,
issue
hold
is
on a
why
moment.
is
I'm
it
gonna
that
call
the
Embassy
Zoom is
one
part
second.
of this and they can't hear us?
So when David Lammy
Why
did
you are being heard
documentary
on live stream?
sent to the Black Cultural Archives, where they sell black poppy roses. Where they sell black poppy roses. Okay?
If she was looking at the monitor, she would have seen me.
And
I can't hear the Zoom, but people are sending me
right,
We heard
messages.
it live stream
Okay,
worldwide.
I'm not sure
Why
what's
don't you
going
phone
on
them
with the
directly?
Zoom.
what
Can
we're
I read
seeing
my
is
comment out, please?
So,
they don't want grassroots
Sorry?
a part of the narrative.
It's me, Herman, here. I wish
And
to read
my
my
job is not to
comment
get
out.
offended.
Yeah, Herman, I'm
Because
trying to
he's got to do
explain
what
that
he's
they
got to do.
appear not to be
His
hearing
blackness is
us.
not
I've
the
got
same
my
as mine.
microphone on.
And
Nobody
when
in
we're
the
looking
room
at
realise that.
people, we
Why
don't
don't you
have the
phone
same blackness.
individuals in the meeting?
So when we see him,
Your voice
and
is
when the
being
world
heard
sees him, the
worldwide.
world sees
How
him in the
can
way
you
that they want to see
And
him.
if you could
the
And they
find
need
our
to
nobody in the
see him that
room
way.
is paying
And when
attention
he
to
was
the
doing that
Zoom?
documentary, I was also working with the Commonwealth War Graves
Sorry,
Commission
Martin, you
around the
can't have too much
disparity about
decorum.
remembrance
Maria's
and creating
yielded
reports.
her
So when
time,
the Sewell report,
Ebony.
there was another report that we was working on that, and they called for me to come and be a part of that report to talk
Okay.
about the disparity around reparations and how to improve that. So when we're talking
You
about
must be able to see my hand, so let
different
me put
forums,
that
we
up.
all have to be doing different things in different ways that will allow for the conversations of a lot of the work that we're doing to have access. If David Lammy had introduced me at that point, would there have been a show? Because when we're commanding our own things and commanding our own narrative, that's not what sells. What sells is, look at all of these unmarked Africans buried on the continent of Africa with no names and no graves. It doesn't matter about the work that Selina Carty is doing to be able to show light to that history so people remember their families and a history that does not reflect how we've contributed, that doesn't have a place in that documentary. It's about showing that shame. Oh my gosh, look, more Africans buried who served in the war and they're not remembered. Who is to blame?
Judy,
So
can
Black
you
Poppy
hear
Rose
us?
tries to provide a solution to that problem. They don't
Okay,
want a
you
solution
obviously
to the
got
problem.
your
They want to keep
sound system off because you don't want the
unpicking
feedback.
that wound. They want us to continue to
Nobody in
work
the
in an
room's
emotional
hearing
way.
us.
So we're always triggered. What if, and we keep asking them to give us
Keep your
what we're
hand up,
saying. We
Herman.
keep
We might
asking
get
them,
I
well,
through.
what
can
are
hear
you
you,
going to do about
Glenroy.
it? No, what are we going to do about it? When we learned there was 40,000
Sorry, Ebony?
Africans unburied, what
I
did we
can
do
hear
about
you.
it? We asked them,
Yes,
what are
you're
they doing
on
about
Zoom.
it?
You can hear me. All the other people on Zoom can hear me, just not the room.
And again, when I say this is not to
No one in the
target
room
us.
is listening to Zoom. They appear to. I thought Judy would have been listening.
Besides asking them to,
This is going out live and it's being
and then
recorded.
when
on
they
YouTube
come
and
up, because
Facebook.
again, it's their remit. When
If
the
you
white
send
man
messages
decides,
directly to those inside the room,
it's his channel. I showed you the broadcasting. I showed you a list of all the things. If they didn't decide for us to be able to know this history, those books and paperwork would be burnt. Same what we're doing in America right now. Isolating what we have access to. And if you don't go to an archive, you can't know what's not in there. You can't, if you haven't seen a book, you can't know that book existed that you need. The sister's book over here. How many people know that the book exists? Did you bring your book with you? What's the title of your book? What's the title of your book? Question mark.
I want to ask you a question. I'm sorry, I didn't quite realise that Black Poppy Rose was just about women. And I want to ask you, So I want to ask you, do you think that especially women in war should be, their graves should be marked in some way to say it was a woman?
So I work with the Commonwealth War Graves Commission. I'm a tour guide for Tower Hill Memorial, which is the most diverse memorial we have in the United Kingdom and holds 36,000 names of men, women, and children who served in World War I and II. On those memorials, women's first names are marked on those memorials to showcase that they are women. So there are key markers to be able to identify women in that way. But when it comes to the graves, unless a family is
I think I know what's happening. Somebody in the room,
inscribed,
presumably Mel, has taken the host.
that information,
So
we won't be able to make sense
we
of
can't seem to get in. I can reclaim it and see if I can
There's
speak.
nothing about black people fighting in the war. Are they now teaching that?
Greetings, Mel.
Yes.
We have a question on Zoom.
No. So we no. Because what we are looking for,
we have a question
is
on Zoom,
the
Mel.
narrative of this general history to include a straight narrative. That's not happening. So when it's happening in schools, this is based on the people in those schools or the community that they're in actively engaging. So when I say no, it's not to say it's not happening, but it's not a curriculum. So but what I'm saying is, if the schools, it's the school's choice. It's the school's choice, not a nationwide choice.
1 second, 1 second.
Mel, can you hear me?
Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you, but you appear not to hear me. There's been a number of people wishing to ask questions. Herman has got his hand up. Can you take him, please?
And the generations before were told that they were liars. They were told that, no, you didn't have people who served. So, Shami.
His brother Efo speaking, and Herman has a question. Can you hear me, Rotimi?
You want to get this information in the school, but sometimes they bring this information to the school and they get fights from the management. That's why sometimes you probably get invited to come into school once. I never get again. So when I go into the school,
Rotimi, can you hear me?
Oh, sorry, slavery. Oh, sorry.
Okay, so what I'm saying is academies have more flexibility to import.
How is it no one on here is
curriculum in the
allowed
school
to ask any
than the States.
question?
And sometimes when it all depends on the teachers in the school, if they've got the flexibility of importing this information into the school. Because just because a teacher is black doesn't mean that they're thinking on a conscious level. So you have to be thinking about who they're speaking to. We've gone into schools and they're like, why are we teaching this information? Because we've got more Korean students in the school. So why are we teaching Black history? And they will say that to us. And then sometimes they invite us to come in and talk about history. They always want us to come in and talk about slavery. Slavery is not where our history starts. Our history starts at the origin of humanity. Yeah, that's where the history starts. So when we do go into the school, I make sure when I go into school, I give you all the information. So if you don't call me again, at least then the children will know. And these are the things as well. And you want the teachers to come to these spaces to actually get the education as well. So maybe we need to go into like UCL and then teach the teachers and do teachers training. But that is happening now. But then you have organizations that only want that will only teach British history and they don't want to talk about African history now. Because there's tick the box now. Yeah, so these are the things. And now because of Black Lives Matter, blackness is not sexy no more, so they don't need to do it no more. So you're gonna see it. So watch Recognition Month this year. You're gonna see less of it.
Selena, last question is for people stop doing that. I'm trying to give some space to Zoom, and every time I turn to Zoom, there's someone waving me off. You're confusing me. And then I'm getting
there is someone with a question now.
I was gonna, but exactly what I'm talking about.
There is a question. Herman has got his hand up and he wishes to speak.
I'm totally confused.
Okay.
Someone has their hand up in the Zoom and wish to speak.
Can you not hear us on the Zoom?
Yes, we can hear you, but
This is
you're
where
not
I want
hearing.
I'm with you on the Zoom.
Thanks,
That's
Black
me.
Poppy
I'm with
Rose.
you.
You have blossomed from the time you was knocking on doors.
Herman has his
10 minutes
hand up.
away.
Can he
Some
ask
years
his
ago with the
question,
pink copies
please?
you were selling. Now a full-blown educational program. Well done. May you be blessed. 3 kisses. That message was left at 21:46. It's now 22:05. There are people on the Zoom who are not actually being able to engage in this discussion, and we'll have to think about that in the future. Sorry, I just wanted to just quickly say, because like within the National Education Union, biggest teachers union, there is a really big push on decolonising. Like it's still in motion, and there's lots of places where we're trying to join up the dots. But right now, you've got like a clear anti-racist strategy that gives you the scope to address those things, so that if there are people blocking that kind of work that is being done, there's a structure in place to actually address that. Like the work that you're doing, I've seen that myself.
People on the Zoom want to ask questions. You were just on the computer. Can't you see us?
Just to say that, like, there's a lot of work being done. It isn't like it isn't happening, but it is something that still needs to continue to.
Fucking attention. I'm trying to get her attention. This is ridiculous. Why do you think I'm swimming?
So, you know,
Somebody needs to call Rotimi or Everton.
Teaching that Egyptians can make people are black or white, like there is scope there. That is there. When you're teaching Key Stage 3, like you should be teaching about the African kingdoms before you start teaching about the transatlantic enslavement. There's a lot more like mainstream books. If you
does anybody have Rotimi's number?
OCR, there's a lot more.
Yeah, Rotimi's done it now. Herman, stand by.
Like a lot of people here, we went to school quite a long time ago, and like no, there's no disrespect. Yeah, but you know, I am in school, and we are very much still building and trying to rectify that. So it is happening, but it should be happening more. Thank you.
Okay, we have to close off because we have to be out of the building in time, and we have our last speaker, Selena. Thank you so much. Everybody give her
Can Herman ask his question, please?
Okay, this is what I'm gonna do. When it comes up for me to speak, I'm gonna allow Herman to ask the question.
No, listen, gentlemen, don't worry about it. Leave it. Don't worry about it.
All right.
Mel, can you hear me?
Why is it we can't hear what they're saying?
Herman, try speaking. Say something.
They said they can't hear us.
Okay.
I heard that.
Can you hear us now?
Hello.
Hey.
Just to let me.
We hear you. Can you hear us?
Herman, try and speak.
It's your turn, please. If you get ready to share your screen, if you're going to share your screen, if not, if Glenroy can put a spotlight on info because the time is running out. I am really sorry, but no, we couldn't hear you. We couldn't hear
us now.
Can I just make a comment, please? Yeah.
Let's make sure they can be heard. Can you hear me now?
Right. It looks like there's when the battery went off on the first mic from earlier on. It looked like it reset the audio, and it's just really difficult. So I can only apologize.
Okay. Can you switch your camera on, please?
Can you hear me, please? Can you hear me?
I'm spotlighting you. I don't know if you can see it, but see, there we go.
Can you hear me?
Can we just have?
Can you hear me, please?
Oh, hold on. Let's see if we get Ifo. Can you try and speak?
First. Let's hold on.
Listen, Glenroy, forget it.
If we all settle down in the room, can no one hear me on Zoom?
Yes, we can. Can you hear us?
You can hear me, so okay. Right.
Can you
Yeah.
you hear us?
Yeah,
you
I will
hear-
do. I'm just trying to prevent the echo. Just give me a second. Right. So this is our final speaker. We're running out of time. I'm really, really sorry. But I would like Ifo to introduce himself and then commence his presentation. Please go ahead, Ifo.
Okay, good evening. Can you hear me? That's the first thing.
Yes.
Okay, beautiful. Whew. So I will be extremely brief. Some of the things I wanted to cover had been covered by the last speaker. But I wanted to show a really, really short clip. 3 parts of it. Because it's important to understand as we talk about building institutions, we do not have any African universities in Africa. We have universities in Africa, but they're not African universities. They are educational institutions from kindergarten all the way to university, are teaching either white supremacy or teaching Arab supremacy. Nothing is teaching us to actually love and respect ourselves. The other thing is when we talk about our history and when we talk about reparations, we're talking about repairing. So if we want to repair the continent, it's very important that we do not try to maintain the colonial boundaries. Those were not created by us. They had a meeting in Berlin in the 1800s. Not a single African was there to say what we wanted. So if we are trying to talk about repairing, then we need to destroy all the borders. And we need to reclaim our traditional territory, not the colonial territories. My name is Ifo. I am Isoko from the Niger Delta region. Isoko is the name of my language, my land, and my people. We have never, ever been Nigerian. There was a group of racist criminals from England who decided to call the place Nigerian. And because I did not go to because I went to a colonial school, I was miseducated into believing I was a Nigerian. So I think we need to one, tell the truth about ourselves, and then we need to share those truths with our children. So on that note, I will share with you some clips from a video that is available on my YouTube channel, which is Afro Healer, and it's a playlist on decolonization because we need to decolonize our education. So I will just play just a couple of short excerpts from this, and it will enlighten, I think, and also deepen our understanding of how we've been misunderstood and miseducated.
Because by virtue of Europe's engagement with Africa at a very negative level, it has also impacted and affected people throughout the world, even in Asia. I see the same experience. That is the experience of Europe having colored the minds of Asians regarding Africa. This is why, for example, a gentleman gave me the other day, 2 days ago, a list of religions in the world, and there was no African religion listed. And that is because simply one assumes that there are no African religions. And we assume that by virtue of the white racist supremacist attitude that was launched against Africa at the very beginning to assault and attack the humanity of Africa.
And I'm just going to skip ahead to just so you can just see some key points.
We must start with chronology in African universities. We must understand that Nubia and Kemet are to Africa as China and India are to Asia and Greece and Rome are to Europe. You have to start there. If you do not start in an African university with Kemet, which is the African name for Egypt. Egypt is the Greek name for the land. If you do not start with Kemet and Nubia, you cannot start properly with an African curriculum. It does not exist. Because what we find in Africa is that most of the universities start with Greece. But this is problematic. 2,500 years before this era, 2,500 years before this era, the Africans had completed the building of the pyramids. 2,500 years before this era. That's like almost 5,000 years ago. The pyramids were up. In 2,500 BC, if you use that designation, there was no Greece. It didn't exist. 2,500 before this era, there was no Rome. It did not exist. So why would an African university start its curriculum from the Greeks? You know, you think the Africans were waiting around for the Greeks before they built the pyramids? You know, people waiting say, you know what, the Greeks are not here yet. We can't do anything. We have to wait till they come. And when they come, they will give us some wisdom and knowledge and teach us geometry. No, that is not the story.
And I'm just going to fast forward to the 10-minute mark, and then I will just close up after that with some final comments.
That all, there's no literature. There's more writing in ancient Africa than in ancient Greece or Rome. You can combine Greece and Rome and not have the writing in the Nile Valley. If you take the ancient writings of Nubia and Aksum and Kemet, you have far more writing than you get from the Greeks and the Romans. But if you're trying to deny Africa its place in the sun, or African people their humanity, you must try as hard as you can to wipe this out. Fundamentally, I've written 72 books, but I wrote early books on African culture and African history. And in one of the books, I wrote about the ancient African philosophers, whose names we rarely hear.
To have elevated aspirations by young. The elevated mind co-finds identified.
Amenemhat, Mary Kari. We know maybe Akhenaten, Kununu. These were philosophers that lived more than 1,500 years before the first Greek philosopher. Who was the first Greek philosopher? Thales of Miletus. And where did he go to school? In Africa. In fact, when Pythagoras was 19 years old, Pythagoras went to Thales and said to him, "Teach me what you know about philosophy." And Thales says to Pythagoras, "You must do as I have done and go and learn philosophy in Egypt." That is the story. But then why do we start with Thales and Pythagoras? Why don't we know Dwarf and Amenemhat? Why have not we read Ptahhotep on aging? And if you have an African university, and an African university is not engaged in this process, then what process is the university engaged in, except the promotion of white supremacy? No, I'm a great negation to that. I've always been. I think that this is the problem with African education. Plato and Eudoxus both studied in Sais. Herodotus in the 5th century wrote about Egypt in the histories. If you go read a copy, even now, you read a copy of Herodotus, you're amazed at all the things that the Greeks really got from Africa. In fact, this is why George James writes in his book, Stolen Legacy. This was a Guyanese professor who wrote a book in the 1950s that there is no Greek philosophy. That if you look at the Greek system, what they did was to distort African philosophy. Stolen Legacy. You should get this book. 1954, he writes this. And this is why we were able to create Black Studies, as it was called, in the United States, or now Africana Studies, is because.
All right. I shared that because I think we're trying to build institutions, and we need to remember, are we building Eurocentric institutions? Are we building Arab-centric institutions? Or are we building, since we have an influence of China, are we building Chinese central institutions? Or are we building Afrocentric institutions based on the teachings, the wisdom of our ancestors, which has been stolen to us, watered down, and then given back to us? So we also need to remember that the oldest university on the planet was in Mali, where they call Timbuktu. That's where everybody in the world used to go. But we do not really talk about that much. And we also do not teach about our writing systems. A lot of times people often say that, you know, we can't find anything about Africa because we didn't write things down. But we were the ones who taught the Arabs and the Europeans how to write. But they don't also tell you that in school. So we need to change the narrative. We need to tell these truths. And then when we tell these truths, we will then be able to move forward and actually repair what has been destroyed, and not just create something that is a imitation of Europe. And on that note, I shall close. And the videos are available. You can go to youtube.com/AfroHealer. And in the playlist, you will see a playlist for decolonization. And I have that video as the first one in it. And now I shall close. And if there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer. Peace be upon you.
Can everyone give a big round of applause? And on Zoom, if you unmute, give a round of applause. Thank you very much.
Let me mute this one here.
So we have a question.
Now Marie's got her hand up.
One second. Who is sharing on Zoom? Is that Maria Williams? Sorry.
Marie X,
Can we
you're up.
Can we take the question from the Zoom first? Marie X, you're muted.
Hi, Ika. Just to say, I'm very happy to announce that you're talking to the converted. All what you've said to us is.
I'm sorry, your voice is muffled. We can't hear you. Say that again. Go ahead.
Right, okay, so basically what I'm saying is, I totally agree with what you said. All what you just said, right, is very well known to us. Many of us in this country have known this for over 30 years.
Can't hear anything.
I was passed down by local African historians that we actually work with. So all this thing you're saying is not new. We should never allow our English accents to fool you, or our French accents, or our German accents.
I'm sorry, Mary X, you're coming in very muffled and muted.
Europe, the Caribbean, America, you know, we've had lots of lecturers come here from America. We have Yokoman, he was a Nigerian African historian, like Kirkler, he was a Guyanese, and also
I'm sorry, Mary, we cannot hear you.
And he had blue eyes and very light skin, right?
Is she hearing?
I don't know. We cannot hear you, sorry. I see Roland had their hand up as well.
Roland,
you're up next.
Yeah, it's not,
Roland? Okay. Do we have any questions from the floor then, from the house?
yes. Greetings. I have a question.
Okay.
My question is in regards to would you want to open universities in other countries other than Africa to teach African education? So we don't have any African universities, yeah, and we could start there, but would you want then to open international hubs anywhere else or just stay in Africa?
Everywhere Africans are, we will. But what I have learned from my elders is actually the concept of a multiversity as opposed to a university. Because there are multiple ways in which Africans existed and multiple ways in which Africans thought. And so we need we need multiversities to teach that multitude of ways, not a university which is like the Borg, which just teaches the colonial way. That answer your question? Yeah.
Is there any questions on the floor? Because we're gonna wrap up. So yeah, we've got a question on the floor. Thank you. Okay, it's been posted in the chat, so I can grab it and post it out to anyone that's in here that wants it. That makes it easy for.
Okay. The question is in the chat.
Any other questions? No questions from here. They were just thanking you for your presentation.
You're welcome.
Yeah, that's it.
Chair,
Okay.
Chair, just to say that Erman wanted to pay his respect to Poppy Rose, but that was during the time no one could hear us, or no one was looking at the screen. I don't know what was going on. So Erman has put his hand down, but thank you to Poppy Rose for the work she's been doing. I think he wanted to pass on that message. Thank you.
It was read out, Glenroy. The message was
Well,
read.
we couldn't hear you and you couldn't hear us.
Yeah, but the message was read out. So there is a question, last question, and then we'll have to close because it's time.
Okay, so yeah, thank you, Bo.
Maybe a final word, Chair.
I'm just asking a question in relation to how you've been received. I just wondered if you could just give us a little bit of feedback, the work that you've been doing from those universities that you're challenging. What kind of response have you had back from that when they're the truth? Thank you. Thank you.
So am I to understand the question is what kind of response are we getting back from colonial institutions like the universities?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I would say overwhelmingly not open. If I know that I have some friends who are historians and also Egyptologists, and the level of hate that they get from their colleagues is next level, because they still have a refusal to accept that knowledge came out of Africa. Now you might have a select few people who are actually down for truth and reconciliation, but unfortunately, overwhelmingly, we get we even see that in recently when there was a Hollywood movie that was done that depicted a Black woman from Egypt, and we had the vicious colonizers from Arab and Asian world who now occupy Egypt complaining that this is blackwashing history, and that Africa, that they still have people in Egypt who claim that Egypt is not African. So we have an uphill road, and then also from some of our relatives who are fellow Africans who deeply are committed to Greece as the center of civilization. So we still have that conversation that we need to have internally to break people away from this mental enslavement that has occurred, because we're still sending our children to be educated by our enemies. And I think Malcolm X said it's only a fool will send your children to your enemies to get educated. So I don't think we should be sending our children to these institutions. We need to as part of our reparations process, exercise our right for our children to be properly educated. And the other people's children, if they also want to learn the truth, which they have in some cases. I know that there have been a growth of Afrocentric schools and Afrocentric curriculum in North America, for example, different parts, and there have been non-Africans who are showing interest in learning that, but it's usually deeply underfunded.
Thank you very much. Okay, just for the building, I do apologize. We are going to allow the Zoom to continue, but we have to close it on this side. We usually continue till 1 o'clock in the morning on Zoom, so please don't think that we're running you off, but we have to close here because the building has to close and we have to get out. So anyway, we do have Frank here and Rotimi to close the conference. We're probably going to ask someone on the Zoom to do a quick, sorry, I shouldn't say that, to do libations to close, because Brother Emmanuel has left the building and Sister Sheba's left the building. But we'd like to close and thank everybody to make sure everybody goes off safely and in a positive way. So here is Frank and Rotimi to close.
Thank you all for coming. And I hope you've enjoyed the day. Don't forget, same time next year. We don't know where, but we'll be around. Oh, yeah, same time next year, we'll be around. Just a few things. I've got to say thank you to the guest speakers. They've all gone, but except for
Charvin and Selena here.
Okay, yeah. So I will say thank you to the guest speakers. First of all, it's a pity Robin's gone, because I've got something for him to add to his list of enslaved people who have made a great contribution to the society. I don't know if you've heard of you heard of the spinning jenny over here. I think that's Cartwrighting. I don't know if you heard of the cotton gin.
Yes.
The cotton gin was actually what caused this, what enabled the Americans, the South, to finance the war, right? Because of somebody invented a way of processing the cotton that instead of giving them 10 bales a week, ended up giving them 500 bales a week. Now it's credited to one guy, but the history has shown that the person who actually was doing the drawing and doing the corrections on the floor was a slave or an enslaved person, right? So I don't know whether that's a good thing or not, but he was the one who really caused the South to continue the fight. With Jackie, we are working on a blueprint. The thing is that we started 17 years ago, right? There was other reparation things going on. What I would call that is that we quantify. Now we've come to a stage where CARICOM's involved in this now. We've come to a stage where, people are actually, everyone knows about reparations, right? This is something they didn't know about 17 years ago. It's a household word now. Right? Yeah. So that's what, it's a Chairman Mao said, they quantify first, and then you have the qualitative leap. And I think we're at that stage now with the blueprint where we can make that qualitative leap. So we're on the way. We're on the way to that. What else we got? iPhone.
Doing well.
I feel that there's a revolution coming on in Africa. Because you cannot tell me you haven't got African universities, right? If that's the case, take over the universities. They are your universities. Let's have a revolution there. It's a season for revolution anyway. So I think we should be doing that. And the work on Marcus Garvey is fantastic. Yeah. And yeah, and just the book on how you started to do that, you know, and what led you. I know when you're researching something and you bite a piece and it you know, you like the taste and you just keep biting and, you know, fighting for more, you know, get that out there so that the youths can, you know, get that feeling and see how, you know, to do your research. Anyway, thank you all for coming. And again, same time, same place, not same place, but same time next year.
Maybe same place.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
I don't think I have to repeat or go down length of statement by my elder Frank or what he has said. But I would like to say this to everybody on behalf of the RMT Black and Ethnic Advisory Committee, the BSC, the Global African Congress. We thank you all for coming down to this event today. And we look forward to see you again next year. We wish you all a safe journey back home and a wonderful bank holiday weekend. Yay. Have a nice one and thank you. See you again next year. Bye, everybody.
Okay, is it possible that someone on Zoom could quickly, do libation, please, so that we can go currently?
Everton is in the room, Elder. Elder Everton is in the room.
Okay. He's shaking his head. We can't prolong this. We need to have the libation. So then give it. Glenroy, you've been appointed. Sorry.
Everton is stepping forward, my sister. Please allow him as the elder to do that.
Oh, come on, you know, seriously.
All right, let me try, I think.
Okay, everyone.
Yeah, I want to thank everybody for being here. Yeah, I want to thank everybody for being here. And I want to thank the ancestors for guiding us so far. On these shoulders, we all stand because without them, we wouldn't be here. And as we leave, and as we look forward to
I'm going to do one thing and you use it 2 ways.
as we look forward to next year, may they go with us, guide us and protect us. Good night, everybody, and thank you.
Ashe, Ashe, Asheo.
Ashe, Asheo.
Thank you very much.
Well,